Hi guys, it's Kira and Mia says hi. I'm doing a quick little video vlog again today, similar to the Veils, doing a little bit of how-to and just sharing some background information. Depending on what platform you're watching on, I will do my best to put a couple of critical timestamps for you so you can skip to the part that you want to watch if you don't want to watch the whole thing. So I'm going to start with a little background on how this video came into existence, some things to keep in mind, talking about less than ideal performances, and then dealing with how to watch your own videos, especially specifically your own performance videos. A little background on this video. I was injured last year and it's been a slow recovery. Like I said, it's been a year and I haven't been feeling so great about my performance levels, and I always give myself a really ridiculously high standard for performance. So I was sharing a little bit about that on Instagram, and we ran a poll and people asked me to share how I deal with less than ideal performances and how I've helped myself watch my own videos. My hope is that this might help other dancers or beginning dancers or whatever level you're at be a little bit more compassionate to themselves and give a little bit more tools to help you think about your dance in a more positive mindset to help prevent performance anxiety or stress or just beating up on yourself. So a little bit more about me. I have struggled with my personal self-esteem in my dance for 10 years. It's been an uphill battle and I'm always trying to improve. If you talk to any of my mentors, they will tell you that I am hypercritical on myself, and I find that this is very common in a lot of dancers, especially the more you care, the more you want it to be right, and the more you want it to be good and validated. And it's not a healthy mindset. In the long term, I found it leads to a lot of performance issues, anxiety, self-esteem issues, and it's something I've been working on with myself, and I'm hoping that this can kind of help other dancers too. So this first thing is that you have to keep a couple of things in mind. One is it is statistically impossible to always have a great, I won't say perfect because perfect doesn't exist, great performance. It's just not going to happen. Everybody has off days or poor days or days that they don't feel good or something happens on stage, and that's okay. We're all human beings. It happens to everybody. In the moment, it might feel like the worst thing in the universe, but in the grand scheme of dance, we've all been there. Like, no one's going to really hold it against you, and if anything, we get it. Like, it happens. I have watched amazing dancers who've been doing it 20, 30, 40 years. I've watched them have the wrong music, have something go wrong with their music, have something go wrong with their props, fall off the stage, have people act inappropriately, like the whole gambit. And these are like the professionals of the professionals, and it happens to them too, and while I don't enjoy having it happen to anybody, it helps me a little bit, remind me like, oh my god, like they're an amazing dancer and they're having an off day. Maybe it's not a big deal when I have an off day too. So that was the first thing I kind of want you to try to think about and maybe just keep in the back of your brain, is that we tend to make a way bigger deal out of things than they really need to be. When it comes to poor performance, I don't really like using the word poor performance or bad performance because it puts us in this like good versus bad mindset, and it's only black and white and it's only positive and negative. So I'm going to call them less than ideal performances that didn't go the way you were hoping, or maybe you don't feel as good about. So I've had plenty of those. It's part of the learning process. So there's a couple of things that I have learned over the years to do that work for me to kind of help me better manage. The first thing I do is when I walk off stage, I do my best to find a safe, alone space. So it's been bathrooms, closets, abandoned dressing rooms, my car, whatever it needs to be, where I can decompress without having to interact with anybody while I'm in a heightened adrenaline state for 5 to 15 minutes. I can be very emotional when I walk off stage. I'm very committed in my performances, so I've cried, screamed, yelled, been depressed. So I just need a space where I can deal with that without anybody else interacting with me. The worse I feel, the longer I usually need, but I try not to disappear for longer than 15 minutes or so. Um, the next thing that I do is I try to acknowledge my feelings, allow myself to feel them, and move on. So what that means is if I walk off the stage and I'm upset, I'm going to allow myself to be upset for a minute. That doesn't mean hang on to it, just acknowledge that I'm upset, be aware of what that feels like in my body, and then let it go. Because if you don't allow yourself to acknowledge it, you're just going to cling to it and hide it, and it's going to carry for hours and hours and hours. Now, I will admit sometimes, that's a text message to a trusted few people who every couple weeks get a, that was an awful performance and it was garbage, and they probably roll their eyes and wait like an hour until I calm down. But I think it's important to just acknowledge how you're feeling and validate it. After that, when I've calmed down a little bit, I've decompressed, I'm not just in an emotional storm state, I'm in a more calm state. Sometimes I'll also check in with myself to see what caused those feelings of less than ideal performance. Was it an external factor, like out of my control? Like they played the wrong music, my music stopped, something fell on the stage, or an audience member? Or was it an internal factor? And be real with yourself. Maybe I didn't prep like I should have. Maybe I decided that experimenting on stage was going to be a great idea on a whim, and just kind of keep those in mind gently. They're not times to berate yourself. It's just to acknowledge, to check in to see if, maybe it's something I'll change for the future so I don't repeat that experience. The last thing, and this is kind of sometimes the hard one, is you do have to go back out. And you might be feeling embarrassed, disappointed. When you go back out, and this is super important, there will most likely be people who want to come up to you and talk to you about your performance. They could be friends, they could be strangers. Whatever it is they say to you, I love this, I love that, it's super important that you just say thank you. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, this was told to me into perspective by Ruby and then reinforced by Aziza. When someone comes to compliment you and you start telling them all the reasons you're wrong, like, oh, I dropped my veil, and then my turns were a mess, and the shimmy sucked, you're insulting them. You're being really rude, and you're telling them that the way that they feel is wrong. And you don't want to do that. The second thing is then you're reinforcing a negative perception of your performance. And the more that you say that, the more you're going to reinforce that negative perception, the more you're going to continue the cycle. Now, if you're just starting with this practice and it's really hard because you're really hard on yourself and you're feeling terrible, my suggestion is just to say the words, thank you, I appreciate you telling me, and then gently change the subject to something else. If it's a practice you feel more comfortable with, then you can kind of expand and say, oh, thank you, I really appreciate you coming up to me. What about my performance did you like, if they haven't told you already? So this kind of helps acknowledge them. I will say I do keep one or two friends on the side that are close to trusted, and I quietly will tell them, be like, all right, give it to me. I feel terrible. Give it to me. But even with them, I do try to maintain gratitude. So you've had your poor performance or your less than ideal performance, you've gotten off the stage, you're back in the group. The other thing I would say is try not to sulk. Like nobody wants to see you with your arms crossed in the corner sulking about your bad performance when you should be supporting other dancers. So do try to see if you can find joy in someone else's performance to help you forget about yours for a little bit. And I guarantee you within like a couple performances, nobody's going to really remember. So don't beat yourself up too hard. So the second part of this video, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about watching your own performance videos. I was a terrible watcher of my own videos. I would get physically ill and feel utterly disgusted with myself. Like it was really bad. And it's not healthy. Like you shouldn't feel disgusted by watching yourself, and you, especially because you're learning, and you're going to continue to improve even if you've been doing it for 20 years, and you're going to look back and see some things you've grown, some things you haven't, and it's just not a healthy mindset. So a bunch of years ago, I set out to work on that and to find a way to watch my own videos. So I'm going to share with you a couple of my tricks and tips that I've used. These are not going to be overnight wonders. It does require practice and commitment, and you're not always going to succeed, and that's okay. Just keep trying, and eventually it just gets better. Um, so the first thing I would say is give yourself at least 24 hours to watch your video. Ideally 48. The worse you feel about it, sometimes I'm going to say the more distance you should put in, because you're not in the same mental state. Like if you've just walked off stage or you're still feeling all of the emotional after effects of your performance, you're not in the right headspace to then either try to be compassionate to yourself, unless you're like, woo, I feel awesome. And even that can get popped by watching the video. So just let yourself enjoy however it is you feel post-performance before watching your video. Because video does not capture a performance. It captures the technical aspects of a performance. It captures what you physically did, but it won't capture usually how you made them feel and what it was like to be in the room with you at the time. So that's something important to keep in mind too. So give yourself some time before watching. For myself, I found now that it's been years, I'm a little bit better about watching them sooner without having the same distance. The next trick I used to do is I'd skip through the video and I'd watch like little chunks throughout instead of watching the whole thing in one sequence. I found that this was able to give me like a bite-sized perspective, and sometimes I was surprised and sometimes I was disappointed, and that would let me check in with myself to see how much more time I needed before I watched it. The next practice, and this one's super important, is when I sat to watch the video, and I've given this advice to other people and it's helped them too, you need to point out 3 things that you did well before you say anything else. Before you nitpick your costume, before you nitpick your hair, your movements, what happened, what were 3 things you did well or that you liked? They don't have to be big things. It could be a moment with an audience member. It could be the way you executed a certain move or took up the stage, or maybe you nailed a section that you had been struggling with. Whatever it is, 3 things. I mean it. And then kind of come back to your video and you can watch it normal. Some other ideas, one that I just recently got introduced by Aziza, was this concept of don't use your performance videos as critique for improvement. This was a new idea to me because I had always used my performance videos, and it was just what I did. So this is a new idea I'm playing with from her. So yay, Aziza! And I'm gonna let you know how that works out for me. I'm still in a few new stages of it, but I like the idea behind it. It's kind of that concept of you do all the work before and you should judge the work and the performance is what it is. If you're interested in learning more about that, talk to her. And then the last thing is don't be afraid to come back to videos after time has passed, like real time. I am currently on a very long video delay just because I haven't had time to go through my videos and share them. And now I'm rewatching videos from last year, years before, and I'm like, oh, those weren't as bad as I felt about them. Or in some cases I'm like, ooh, yeah, I can see my growth from there. You know, so don't be afraid to come back. So in conclusion, those are a couple of my tips and tricks and ways that I deal with less than ideal performances and watching my own performance video. Definitely feel free to ask me questions, try them out, let me know how they work for you. I would love to know. Or if you have any tips or tricks that you feel have worked for you really well that you want to share with me, I would love to hear those too.